Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to SecurityGuideTV.com, special edition ASIS International Security Experts. Tim McCreet is on the ASIS Board of Directors and the Director of Strategic Alliances for Hitachi Security Systems, or Systems Security. Sorry about that. Today we're going to talk about something that is a giant pet peeve of mine, and that is the shortage in the security industry of qualified personnel to push all the buttons, including this live stream button right here, to make all this stuff work. And it's a critical problem. And I want you to pay close attention to the show. You're going to learn a lot of things that are probably going to scare you to death, but that's kind of the point here. We need to make this a very serious initiative, make sure everybody understands how serious the shortage of qualified security personnel to operate technical systems is in the country. So welcome to the show, Tim. So great to have you on.
Thank you so much. Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, we like to have street creds here on Security Guide TV. So let us know your background. You have a very unique background in that you started in physical security and transitioned to cyber. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, that's always been a fun story to give to audiences when I'm doing presentations. I actually started in 1981. I was like 12 when I started, but that was 1981. And the first job I had was actually working as a chief security officer in a hotel in downtown Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I don't know if anybody listening has been to Winnipeg, Manitoba, but the fun I had in that position was kicking out hookers and drunk curlers from the hotel lobby. That was my introduction to security back in 1981. It was interesting. I learned a lot. My first half of my career was all physical security, and I've done everything from fraud investigations and forensics right through to HR files, executive protection. And in about 1998, I kind of decided this internet's going to stick around for a little while, so I decided to send myself back to school. So I pulled myself out of the workforce, and I actually spent 2 years at a technical college in Edmonton, Alberta, and I learned computer systems technology. So in 2000, I came out with a diploma in computer systems technology, and I didn't want to code anything. I wasn't one of those guys. I didn't want to code stuff. I wanted to break stuff. And my job is if I could figure out how to break it, I could also figure out how to protect it. So from that point forward, I worked in information security roles and became chief information security officer, or the equivalent, in 4 different companies from 2000 till today.
Now, you said something very interesting that caught my attention. You said that you figured that the internet was going to stick around and you better educate yourself on it, right? I figured that out in 1984. I had my first computer in 1984. It was 2 floppy drives. One was the operating system. The other one, I think I could play Frogger and operate Quicken. Quicken for DOS was back then. And I brought it to the police department to write some police reports. And I said, hey, look, this computer can count from 1 to 1,000,000 in 15 minutes. And that was a big deal. Now it takes a nanosecond to do it, right? And the chief says,
Yeah.
Harold, we don't need the computers. Get that out of here. Computers and police work are stupid. And I just knew this was a big thing. I listened to the guys on the radio, saying, oh, we got this company called Yahoo. We got this company called Google. And I mean, I got all this stuff, and I've always embraced it in my physical security career and incorporated it into the physical security things I was responsible for, right? Tell me when and how this light bulb came on your head that made you think, back in 96, this was important.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little slow learner. Sometimes it takes a little while longer. And, I think it's Canadian cold winters that kind of makes things a little slower for us up there as well. See, I'm just going to pick on you now because you're in LA. I had a couple of things I needed to focus on when I was in the physical security side. But I started to see more and more, at least in the organizations I was working, I saw more and more devices being attached to the corporate network, like cameras, card access, a few other devices I saw being attached. And it was starting to scare the hell out of me. And I started to realize that we weren't thinking of these as part of the IT network. We're still looking at them as physical security devices. So that's when I decided, you know what, this is something I want to spend more time on. So I did. I made the conscious decision to pull myself out of the workforce and go back to school. And it wasn't without a lot of hesitation. I had a good career rolling along in the physical security side. I could have stayed there, but I thought, you know what, I've always been intrigued by computers. I was always on call. So to your point, I actually had a really old laptop with a hardwired line in my home when I was on call for a telephone company I worked for. And it was so that I could bring up non-published numbers for law enforcement in case there was a requirement for it after hours. So I actually had a separate line in my house dedicated to this gone awfully big laptop. And that's what kind of struck some of the interest as well. So for me, it started with there. I made that decision to jump and get into computers itself. And I haven't regretted that decision. It just to your point, maybe a little earlier, maybe, but it's been a good career.
Right. Well, I'm going to be a little harsh to my physical security friends because let me say this, and I said this at ASIS a couple weeks ago. There's no such thing. All right. We're all security now. And in fact, the word
Absolutely.
security has been commandeered by the cyber people. 10 years ago, that word disappeared. You know, now you got to type in physical security, right? To get
Absolutely.
what we do.
Absolutely.
So everything is on the internet. Your access control devices, your locks, your mag locks, that's all on the internet. So to ASIS's credit, they're trying to bring people into this. I think kicking and screaming, kind of, in a way, but we're getting there. Now, let me ask you this. We think there's anywhere between a 1 million and 1.8 million person shortage of qualified people in this industry that can push that button and operate that access control. Maybe security programmers we're missing. So it goes all the way from a lack of people that might be able to operate a robot, you know, as an end user, to people that cannot code. Have we lost that battle? I mean, if we put 1 million people in a college and trained them for 4 or 5 years, every year for 20 years, you know what I'm saying? I wonder if we've missed the window to get that done.
It's hard. I agree with the point. This is tough. How are we going to come up with that volume of people? How are we going to convince that many people that this is an actual career, that you can make a living out of this, that you can actually provide value to an organization, you can enable a company to achieve its objectives? And don't get me wrong, I would love to see more people come on board and go through the university, through the college programs. It's just, how do you do that volume of people that quickly? So part of it too, I think, you know, and this is where I think we need to come back as professionals, is we also need to start bringing people in. And, you know, I remember back in the old days, we used to have the on-the-job training programs. And you used to get people coming in from, I remember in the military when my dad was in and my mom was in, we had a lot of, you know, I heard them talk about OJT training, and it was bring people in who had an understanding or an interest in it, and they would teach them on the fly or on the job. Right? So it was beyond a mentoring program. Maybe that's an opportunity we could be looking at to pursue. Because I've hired folks, you know, throughout my career that didn't have university degrees, that didn't have college diplomas, but they did have this desire, they did have a want, they did have this real curiosity and how do things work? And, you know, you and I talked before we came on air that you had self-taught, that you actually spent the time doing that. Well, can we do that as well? Is there any way that we can start bringing people into this industry, to this environment, and train them along the way, and then offer them that formal training once they get established or once they start understanding where they want to explore and grow their career? I think we can. I think we're going to have to. We need to find some really unique solutions, because 1 to 1.8 million people in a short period of time through a formal education process is going to be just burdensome. I don't know how else to put it. It's going to be burdensome.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, I think the LA Public Schools got rid of wood shop and metal shop and auto shop years ago. That's what I had when I was in junior high school. Fantastic classes. I mean, if you can't crack a book and go to college, let's fix cars. Everybody has value in society, no matter what their skill set is, right? So maybe we need an equivalent wood shop of cyber shop at the junior high level to start getting people interested in this. And the reason I say that is because my kids, one's a nurse. She's got a BSN, Bachelor of Science in Nursing, pretty smart girl. And my son is working towards his graduate and PhD in math. Neither one of them, slightest interest in cyber stuff. And I scratched my head and said, really? They're like, Dad, can you fix my computer? Can you fix my phone? You're supposed to be telling, I'm supposed to be giving you my phone to fix. And
exactly. Yeah.
Right. So that millennial group has lost this interest because they think these things have been around forever. And I think this is another danger we're overseeing. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think there's some other, there's some great programs though. I know in the US and in Canada, they've got the Cyber Patriot, Cyber Titan programs that they're running in both countries. And to your point, it's really targeting those junior high and high school students, but also, the students that are going into the university or the post-secondary education programs. But I think you're right. I think we have to get to the point where we're getting, kids hooked at this stuff, grade 7, 8, 9 in that junior high era, so that they can start looking at this as an opportunity and a chance to learn skills early. Can I bring those skills forward as I get into high school? Can I take that with me as a career into university, or can I do an on-the-job training program once I get out of high school? If I've done 3 years of, understanding vulnerability management, maybe taking a crack at doing some pen testing, maybe doing some white hat hacking to understand part of it? Absolutely. We have to get really creative with this. And I think those two programs, the one in the US and in Canada, I think those are great opportunities to take them and expand, or for God's sake, push them and see if we can get more people engaged in working on them.
Now, my parents didn't raise any dumb kids, right? But I'm no genius, okay? And I taught myself how to do this whole live stream setup that we're talking right now. I push all the buttons, I run the engineering, I do the technical stuff. It hurt my head. I caused live stream a lot of headaches calling the helpline, but I did it within about a year, and now I'd be considered an expert in this live stream software and this platform, right? And now I take it around and I do it remotely. So people can learn it. I think what I would suggest to people is the first thing you need to do to get this stuff is to learn the vernacular, which I did. So what's pen testing? I don't know. I'm going to go look
Absolutely.
it up, right? I'm going to look up what a URL is, a Universal Research Locator. Now it's called an address on the internet, but that's what those vocabulary words do to help you learn. What might you give, what suggestions might you give to a guard who hopefully listens to Security Guy Radio, that would generate their interest to embrace this stuff and want to find out more and maybe want to self-teach? I mean, there's zero unemployment in this business, and you can start making $100,000 a year if you get your cred, right? What advice would you give to people like that?
And I've done this a couple of times where, people come to me and said, how did you go from physical security into IT security? Well, to your point, and exactly your point, I asked a lot of questions and I was really interested in how things worked. And I learned early on, I wasn't that technical guy, but I wanted to learn enough about the technology so that I could at least be relevant in a conversation, that I understood the technology. So I did. I spent time doing my own research. I went online and got a hold of resources. I read a lot of For Dummies books. Yeah, I'll be honest, I read a lot of those just to get my head back in the game and to learn more before I went back to school. The other thing too is, I'm going to steal from Rochelle Lawyer and Brian Allen's book from the Enterprise Security Risk Management Principles, is that, can I explain to people that everything we're doing in our industry is based on risk? Absolutely. And if you wanted to learn a different portion of that industry and understand more from an IT perspective, here's a path to take. Yeah, absolutely. And we should be doing more of that. You can absolutely transition from a secure, like a career in physical security to IT security. And I was, and no joke, I was the Chief Information Security Officer for the government of Alberta. I didn't have a degree. I had grade 12 and a college diploma on computer systems technology. And I ran the security for a $48 billion a year organization that had IT operations around the world. So you can do this. And I'm living proof that someone who sure as hell is not technical anymore can become a part of this world, because you think of things from a risk perspective. You don't get tied down into I can't. It's how can I? Those are the questions you need to start asking. How can I?
Well, this is brilliant. This is the concept, because before the show you were talking about, for example, a home appraiser, a guy that comes out and does an appraisal on your house for real estate, let's say. That guy is doing a physical security assessment, and he doesn't even know that. Explain that to people.
I mean, that's part of the brilliance of this. How do we get people engaged into our industry and start thinking about it from a risk perspective and looking at the different components that support ESRM? But yeah, you're right. That story I know we talked about before I came on air is that's exactly it. He's looking at changing his career. And I know he's a home inspector, and we talked about it. I said, look, from the time you get out of your truck and get your ladder out and you start walking up the sidewalk with your client to take a look at the home, you're actually conducting a risk assessment, because you're starting from the perimeter of the building in. From a compliance perspective what you need to see from a building code. You need to understand the different types of building structures. How old is this facility? How long has it been in place? What was the original electrical code, etc. I mean, you can work your way through the entire home. But all you're doing is you're making observations, you're documenting them for your client, you're providing them with your assessment of risk, and then you're giving them a timeline of, you're going to have to replace the roof in 3 years, it's going to cost X. You're going to have to look at replacing some of your electrical systems, it's going to cost X. You may have to worry about, let's say you have to replace the landing, or I'm going to have to worry about some of the windows. But each one of them is a decision the homeowner is going to take into account when they make their final buying decision. And then they're going to take that into account when they provide an offer to the home. And if they're thinking ahead, they're actually going to start planning their budget, their future budget, to remediate the risks in the home that they own.
Well, I think one thing I would say to my physical security friends who are in cyber and they don't know it is that people like you and me that work in both worlds are actually a more valuable asset to the industry. Now, I'm a little upset because years ago.
Can you tell my boss that? Can you
well, yes, and maybe you could tell my listeners that. But I mean, years ago, I was preaching. Listen, these cyber guys from our IT department at the studios are coming over and telling us what to do. And many years ago, they started replacing physical security people, which are basically ex-law enforcement for the most part, or ex-law or ex-feds, right? FBI. They started replacing them with IT people, saying, you know, the IT guy, the chief information security officer, he can run both. He can run physical and cybersecurity. And they really can't. No offense, fellas. With very few exceptions. There are some people that can, right? But if you don't want to be replaced in the physical security world, you have to get involved in the Internet of Things. You have to embrace this. And in fact, if you can do what Tim has done, physical security, so to speak, can take back the security corporate environment and own more of it. Because every year, physical security loses more and more of that area of responsibility because the IT people take it over and they do it, and rightfully so, by the way. If you have 1 billion attacks on your network, that's pretty important, as opposed to one guy sneaking in the gate, which could be incredibly serious. I get that part too.
Yes,
but,
absolutely.
But you got to merge those two things. So, I mean, that's my advice: is get in there and learn these things, so you won't be out of a job in 10 years. I mean, am I wrong? I know it's a little harsh.
No,
but
I think there's a point where we all have to figure out how do we stay relevant inside the industry that we're in, and how do we help grow it into. It's the relevance and this understanding that we need to move to this concept of a profession. And this is where I keep going back to enterprise security risk management. Is regardless of the flavor or the stripe that we wear, whether we're IT or cybersecurity, we're focused on SCADA or control system security or physical security. The job that we all have is still identifying and reducing the risk on behalf of the organization. The trick is to remain relevant in your role. Can you actually understand the different components that make up the risk program or the security program? And can I provide value by offering my skill sets to the other side of the house? And I've been lucky in my career, and touch wood, I've been really lucky in my career that I've been able to be on both sides of that aisle. And, I don't know whether I'm still accepted on the physical security clubhouse, but I get a chance to go play with those guys every now and then, and I get a chance to, regain some skills back there. But the point I'm making is that we really need to understand the concept of relevance and how do I continue to remain relevant in an industry that changes, honest to God, almost daily.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's interesting is that the physical security people, I think a lot of people would argue that we're experts in the height of a fence, the type of lock. No, that's not what we're experts in. We are experts in people management, right? Because you're doing two things. Yeah. You're keeping honest people more honest with all your barriers, and you're trying to keep bad guys out with your barriers. And that's about knowing people. The IT guy that sits in the server room upstairs with his little lamp in the dark and types a bunch of things, that's not a people person. No offense, fellas, okay? But you're not interacting with people. You're interacting with computers and code all the time. So if you want to be relevant, learn the computer stuff, bring the people skill set into the computer world, and boy, is that an effective way to catch bad guys. I got to tell you, it's really the only way,
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've been able to do that throughout my career. And again, I've worked with some just stellar and brilliant individuals. Later on in my career, when I got through a few more assignments on the IT side, and this is going to sound very pathetic, but I remember one of my crews, I had a bunch of PhDs, just brilliant folks, and they'd finished their masters, they're working on their PhDs, and they're working in the back room as part of my security analyst team. And I felt so embarrassed of my own credentials from an education perspective. I sent myself back to school to get my master's. So I did it again. I started taking night courses to finish up my master's in science and security and risk. And it wasn't because I needed to have that credential. It's because I wanted to keep learning. And I felt that I could offer more if I was able to learn more. So I went back to school, and it was amazing the things I learned from there. It wasn't a pure technology degree. It was more of a risk and a science degree. And what I focused on was grounded research theory and being able to ask the right questions and understand the principles of risk. So for me, I gained a level of appreciation of the industry that we're in, and how can I offer and provide some of that information back. So for me, it's I've been really fortunate. I've had the good luck of going back to school twice in my career and being able to benefit from it both times, but giving that information and that knowledge and experience back to the organizations I work for.
So if I experience security is driven by two things, either needs or budgets. And the needs don't necessarily have a budget if the need is severe, such as 9/11, such as, immediate threats, active shooter. There's no money in the world that can replace people that are lost, or insurance can cover people that are lost. But if it's an average everyday operation and your insurance company says you better have security, then it's budget driven. And that restricts, the first thing it restricts is training, right? So let's get back to your idea of this on-the-job training, on-site training, just small little incremental briefings every day about, what an ISP is and what do these terms mean and what happens. Do you think we could get the guard force involved in this? Because I'm a little upset that we wasted the last 15 years not training the 1 million guards we have in the United States to come over and fill this gap, right? I mean, there's your workforce that should have been trained. And I ran 2 guard companies, and I know how cheap they are because the margins are small, right? And they're not much profit and not much money to sit down and train somebody on a BlackBerry back in the day. But we did it on job. We did it on site through training. How can we get that guard force engaged? And by the way, fellows, my fellow security officers, there is zero unemployment in the cyber security world. Zero. Okay. So
I like how you keep bringing that up. Thank you. Yeah. So. Yeah.
So what do you think? Are the guards the people to go to in addition to the new millennials? Because the guards have the physical security experience. They get part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true. I think if it's presented in the right fashion, most people would embrace something new. And if they understood how you can apply this to your current role, sure, or that there's an opportunity to move forward in your career, if you looked at this as an option to change careers, absolutely. But I would challenge, there's even more interesting and maybe, out of the box thinking that we could do. Why are we not engaging some of our post-secondaries to offer some of cross-training with the guards that are currently walking around the perimeters of your campus?
Yeah, I don't know why we're not.
We do that.
Well, what's funny about that is back in the day when I was kind of getting out of the guard business when smartphones were coming of age, but we still had some BlackBerries. We had some basic smartphones back then. And I can't tell you how many times I said, get off your cell phone, get off your cell phone. You're fired, you're fired, you're fired. When I should have been saying, stay on your cell phone, get information about your job, get information about people coming and going, be educated on your smartphone. I'd be happy with that. But what's ironic is a guard can figure out how to work Instagram, Facebook, and a bunch of things that people with my white hair can't work, right? So they're 25% there. They have the basic knowledge. And whether you're working Instagram or working access control system, basically the same functions. Understanding what the button does and engaging. That's a basic place to start. I think we can do it.
I think you're right. And I think, so let's use that analogy of access control. Understanding, this whole principle of once you understand what the risk is, regardless of whether it's physical or IT, but there's so many analogies, and Dave Tyson did just an awesome job presenting at ASIS the seminar when it was IT security for physical security folks. It was a great approach because the things that in the physical security, whether you're walking the perimeter or whether you're checking the doors, would you actually allow somebody to wander around inside your warehouse for 295 days because that's the average length of time a hack is inside your network, or where you recognize or realize it? Yeah. What kind of damage can you do inside a network if you have that unfettered access across the entire environment? So those principles are already on the physical side. I apply them now and take that knowledge and just learn a little bit more to understand the real techniques inside the IT or the cyber side. Absolutely. But what I would look for is, can I talk to those security guard, the officers who have an interest in this? That they're not doing it just to punch the clock or try to get another $2 an hour for their salary increase. Can they actually look at this as, I'm actually interested in this from a career perspective, and where else can I go with this? That, holy smokes, if you get that kind of motivation, that kind of interest, you bet. Then a good chunk of this problem can be dealt with. Absolutely.
What keeps Tim awake at night? What do you worry about the most in this world?
Okay, you're just going to go with the professional stuff, right? Not the personal. So.
Well, it could be anything because it all kind of merges together. But
the deal that worries me more than anything is right now there isn't a company that you can trust with your data that either hasn't announced a hack or that I haven't figured it out yet. Like the part that scares me, the last big one. Jesus, really? 140 some million records. Almost every American with a social security number. How do you resolve that? Like, how do you resolve that? And then how do you deal with how do you deal with the repercussions from that? Because this is not something you're going to see tomorrow. This is a 10, 15, 20-year problem that you're going to have to deal with. So this is the stuff that scares me, is that I think we've become numb to the concept of a breach. We've become numb to the idea that your privacy and your information is readily available. And I think we've become numb to the sheer volume of how many times we've been contacted by a credit card company to say that this hotel got breached, your PlayStation account got breached. Oh, by the way, the account that we use to track the credit ratings to make sure that you didn't get your credit rating breached just got breached. Really?
That's right. Right.
That's the stuff that scares the hell out of me, is that we've created this mass of data about each one of us. And we're relying on companies that, to your point earlier, I may or may not have the budget. I may or may not have the ability to address the risk, but I'm going to take your money. I'm going to take your information. I'm going to provide you a service. Let's cross our fingers and make sure we don't get hacked. Wow.
Good points. Good. I think it comes down to the people at the top, possibly in my age category with the white hair, who don't quite get the urgency of these things because they have to drive those decisions downward to their staff. And I think that may be changed in the next 5 or 6 years as people might start retiring. You get some new guy in there that's 40 that might have a different perspective on the leadership and sense of urgency, which I always think is super important. Tim McCreat, ASIS Board of Directors and also Director of Strategic Alliances for Hitachi Systems Security. Hitachi is a great company. I interviewed him at As-Is a couple years ago. And a shout out to Hope over there at Hitachi. So check Tim out on the web. And this has been a great conversation. We could go on for hours about it. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Tim.
Great. Thanks so much. And I appreciate it all. And to everybody who listened in today, I hope you got something out of this today. And again, no sense of panic, folks. We can get through this. We just have to understand that we need a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking on this as well.
Very positive. With that, we'll say not good night. I guess it's good afternoon. I never know where I am exactly in the world. But thanks for coming on the ASIS Security Council Security Expert Show here on the ASIS Network on live stream at securityguidetv.com. Until next week, be safe.
Thank you.